Hello, and welcome to Mr. L's Bell. At Mr. L's Tutoring and Enrichment, where passion for teaching meets the science of behavior. So, in today's episode, I wanted to make sure to wrap up our conversation about ACT, acceptance, and commitment therapy. So, our first few tenets that we spoke about already in previous videos were going to be acceptance, which is just taking inventory of your situation, taking inventory of the sources of information that you have, and inventory of the people who are around you, and inventory of how you feel about yourself. The next thing we had was diffusion, how we actually started to see our thoughts as separate from ourselves. Okay, so again, I'm gonna point out the picture that we came up with, or that I've heard to describe this, is you are sitting next to a stream, and your ideas or things going through your mind are just leaves going into the stream and going past you. Your ideas are not you. Okay, that's the fusion. The next part was our values. Values being what is important to you, what would you prioritize? And I wanted to make sure that you separate that from what people around you are saying to prioritize. Okay, so I want to make that distinction. Your values are your own, it doesn't have to be the same as everybody else. The next part is going to be our committed action. So, as you define those values, what do you do to actually show that those are your values? What is more important to you, and how do you show it with your through your behavior? And our next two is going to be first, self as context. This one's a little hard to conceptualize sometimes, but what I want to really explain or kind of walk us through is that we have three layers. I always think of it as three layers. On the very first layer is going to be the external world. Everything that's happening around you, the sounds, the noises, the smells, the everything that's going on. The external pieces of information. You don't have control over those. They're just happening around you and you react to them. Okay? The next layer is when you're actually looking through your own eyes. It's really funny. I thought about this like the Men in Black. You guys, if you have seen that movie, there's an instance where they see a big person and you find out that it's actually a robot, and you have a little tiny alien that's living in his head and is literally just moving the body. So that's the picture I want you to think about. That body itself is going to be just your lens. Okay, that is your lens. The next part, the third portion, is you, what you decide to do. That little alien, he decides what this whole body, the self as context, is going to do. Okay, but we got to think a little bit more about the self as context, because there's layers to this. So experiences that your body has had, instances of trauma may be attached to external stimuli. So I want you to be very present and aware that yourself as context has certain hangups, has certain biases based on the events that you've experienced before. All right. So I want you to always realize that you are making decisions through the lens of yourself that affect the outside world. Okay. So outside world is that first layer. Yourself as the MIB or the Men in Black robot body, that's yourself. And that little alien inside there is you deciding what this body does. Okay. So that's self as context, pardon. I think of it almost like you're a little person driving a vehicle. Your body is a vehicle. Your vehicle experiences life very different than some other people, depending on your make, model, and the color. Like all these things have an effect on your experience in everyday life. And so that is self as context. Okay. And one of the last things we have is being present. And as of what, maybe 3-5 years, we've been, even more than 5 years, we've been calling this mindfulness, being aware and being present in the moment. So if anything is overwhelming, or if anything needs to slow down, needs a little extra processing, taking a time to take note of your five senses. People like to say, what are you seeing right now? Give me one thing you see, give me one thing you hear, give me one thing you feel, maybe your clothes on your shoulder, clothes on your shoulders or anything like that. One thing you smell and one thing you taste. Okay. That little exercise is helping you stay present, being present in the moment. And now that we've added being present to that self as context, you now have an extra perspective to take. Okay. One example I use that's really helpful for explaining this is the road rage example that I used previously when I was talking about committed action. All right. The example was just me in my car driving and either being cut off or something happens that makes me upset and reactive, and I react immediately to it. All right. So self as context is taking note of that, understanding that you're going to react that way. You know it. So what we do now when we're trying to be present is tell yourself, hey, what were our values? What were the committed actions that we said we were going to do? And let's start to engage in those instead of going down the familiar prompted route. I don't want to say prompted, but it's reinforced. Why I think about road rage specifically is people take pride in being a asshole. And so it's a very funny self-preserving thing. All right. And even with the self as context, this is a great one. Self as context, you're a asshole. How do you react when somebody cuts you off? Are there expectations now that you've labeled yourself an asshole? This is exactly the kind of thinking I want you to do, and ACT is getting you to do. It's getting you to go through the behavior, go through the scenario, and what is the ideal outcome that you would like. And let's focus on making sure that our behaviors reflect that ideal outcome. All right. So self as context can be also thought of as the labels you use to describe yourself, the labels you use to point out your relationship with another person. Maybe it's friends, teachers,